Hey there YouTube, and welcome to Big Mike Beard Wisdom. And today we're going to talk about 5 tips to do before getting solar. So for the first tip, there's all sorts of different types of solar systems. So you can have a residential or a commercial, and there's also large ones on the side of the road. So this is one on the side of the road, and here in Minnesota they're putting quite a lot of these. They're very large solar panel fields, and I believe a lot of them are going in a community solar based format. And then here, I just quickly Googled community solar. So we'll talk about community solar in just a little bit, because this is going to be one of the later tips. And probably not for the reason that a lot of people are thinking. But basically, I would just recommend looking at the satellite view and then just going, yeah, you know what, I do have some areas that I could probably put something. It probably could go on the roof of the house, it could go on the roof of the garage. I mean, from this picture, to me, it seems like it could go on the shed, but as I found out, it can't. But there's also other things that could have been. So maybe along here, there could have been panels that could have gone up, and we could have had like a pergola / outdoor kitchen thing or something like that with a solar panels for roofs. But I'm sure they probably would have said, well, you got a big old maple tree right here too. But I mean, it's one of those things where as long as you take a quick peek at this will give you an idea of, okay, maybe I'm not the best and I won't get the most ideal production, and it can help you rein in those expectations that you're gonna have, while also leaving that little glint of, hey, I bet I can do this. And now tip number 2. So this graph here, the gray bars shows power pulled from the grid, and the blue bars show power that the house uses. And then the yellow bars is the solar power that was produced. And this tip actually applies to looking at what uses, consumes, or leaks your power. So obviously your fridge running is going to be something that's going to wind up using power. If you have an electric stove, that's going to use power at different times. So it'll cause spikes during the day, depending on when you use it. A microwave, toaster, anything that uses power, even stuff down to the bulbs that you have. So a lot of people are replacing their bulbs and going to LEDs if they have the old style bulbs. And if you watch a lot of YouTube videos, maybe on solar and stuff like that, a lot of people will say, hey, before, making the jump and going into solar, because you're trying to save money, replace these items. That way you're able to see how much power you're actually consuming and stuff like that. And my tip is don't do that. So definitely try and evaluate how many things you have that use power and even leak power. So let's say maybe you're thinking about doing windows or upgrading the insulation in your house or something like that. I would say hold off on doing that for a little bit until after you've maybe looked at solar, because the whole thing for solar is that they might be basing everything off of your power consumption prior to installation of your system. So let's say that in the years before you go to install your system, you replaced all your bulbs, you replaced your windows, you filled in gaps and cracks in your house along your foundation or something like that where air might be leaking through. You upgraded to more energy efficient appliances and stuff like that, and then you could decide to go solar. It's going to limit kind of like how much power you can generate. Which in the first couple years probably isn't going to impact you that much, but a lot of the solar panel installation companies and the people that'll do the work for you will talk to you about how some of this stuff works. And some may say, yeah, go ahead and change stuff over. Some may say, no, hold off. And they may be able to help you for given your region, given your area, about how the power stuff works. Because I know for me, I believe for the insurance, I can't produce more than 120% of the power that I consumed prior to having the solar panel system. Otherwise, go ahead and make those upgrades. But like, let's say you're thinking about, you're debating solar panels, and maybe you're debating, adding air conditioning or converting from a gas stove to a electric stove, or you're going to add a refrigerator to the garage. If you know that you're going to be adding something, maybe delay your solar panel installation until you've gotten a few more consumers in, and then you can show a history of a greater amount of consumption. Tip number 3. So for this next tip, we're going to be talking about community solar. And these giant farms that have been going up here in Minnesota are pretty cool and should generate quite a lot of power, but there's also some drawbacks to it. So a lot of times when people talk about these, they talk about how they assign you panels in the community solar farm, and then you get a 5, 10, 20, 30% reduction in cost of the power that it produces on your bill. So sometimes the way it sounds is that you're going to save 5, 10, 20, 30% on your bill, but it's only saving you the power that the panels actually produce. And then this can also complicate stuff if you're thinking about going solar on your home itself, because you get a little bit of a credit now, and because of that credit, maybe you can't produce the same amount of power as you could before. So just like in the previous tip where I mentioned about, having a higher consumption rate, having community solar may look like you're already producing solar power. So it would reduce the amount of power that you could truly produce on your home. That would wind up saving you in the long run. So while these plans might save you 5, 10, 20, 30%, whatever the percentage is of the one plan, it kind of doesn't always make a whole lot of sense unless you're in like an apartment or something like that, or you're in a bad spot where there's no way you can go solar. Tip number 4. So there is honestly no shortage of solar installers. So should you happen to Google solar installers near me, you'll see that right away you get quite a few ads, especially if you're here in Minnesota. But there's also all sorts of different companies that install, and I would recommend getting multiple quotes and also reading reviews. So even this little map here, you can see there's quite a few in the area that do solar. And the big thing for me was that I wanted to see like who was close to me in case I had a problem. So in case there was an issue or something like that, is there a company that I can just call real quick and say, hey, I got this issue, what do I do? And a lot of the companies, especially probably the better companies, wind up putting you in contact with someone that winds up being, this is the person that helps watch over you once your panels are installed. So even though you've done some research into solar, you'll always wind up learning some new aspect or something like that with every person that comes to do a quote. And the nice thing is that as soon as you do kind of like one quote, you'll have what you need to do in order to do other quotes. They'll want to know how much power you've used over the last year or two. They'll also want to know which energy provider you have, because that'll dictate what kind of like credits you can get. And inevitably when you're talking to them, you're going to pick up some stuff. So the first 2 companies that came and checked out my house for solar, they didn't offer a battery backup system. And also one company would only do residential panels versus commercial panels. Now if you Google real quick, residential versus commercial solar panels, ignoring the first ad, there's a pretty decent response from this a1asolar.com. And one of the big things that it states is that a residential solar panel system typically has 72 cells and is 65 inches by 39 inches, whereas a commercial solar panel system typically has 96 cells and is 78 inches by 39 inches. Residents can have commercial-sized solar panels as long as they don't mind the size. Now, every company is going to be a little bit different, because one of the companies that I talked to, they would absolutely not install a commercial panel on a home. or your garage. And then depending on the company, it's going to depend on how much these are really going to differ. Because a lot of times a commercial solar panel is going to have a silver frame. So like if you look at my panel, this has silver frame on the side, whereas a residential one, you can either get silver or you can get black. So with this going on my gray roof of my garage, it's kind of one of those things where I don't so much mind the silver. And if this was black, it would stand out to me so much more. But that particular company was saying that basically it's such a larger panel and it's ugly, and it's one of those things where that's their belief, and then their idea of quality is that it should be something that looks really good. So for me, putting it on my metal-sided garage wasn't a big deal, but if it were to be truly mounted to the house, that might be a situation where I would want to go with a black frame, where I would want to make it look a little bit better. And a lot of companies are going to offer different solar panels from different solar panel companies. So they might have certain models where they're more efficient than other ones. They might have certain models where they're rated to a longer warranty. So essentially, once you've gotten to the stage that you're getting multiple quotes, you're really going to be getting into the finer details of a solar panel system and looking at whether or not you want to go with residential panels versus the commercial size panels. Is going to be something that may dictate the total amount of power that you can get. As besides just the number of cells, there can be efficiency differences, there can be slight coloring differences, there can be weight differences, there can be warranty differences, there can be quite a few different aspects of going residential based versus commercial based panels. And it may even change possibly how you wind up having it wired up. But all that's going to come down to how the particular company that you're working with is going to go and what directions they have, what options they have to offer you. And for me, we went with the commercial panels because they were a little bit cheaper and they're actually more efficient. They also had just as long of a warranty, and the particular company that I was looking for had the Tesla Powerwall 2, which is what I was looking for a battery backup. Tip number 5. So tip number 5 is more about being mentally prepared for what's about to happen. So you're going to run into headaches in the course of doing a solar panel project. There's going to be a lot of different paperwork you've got to go through. And like for us, even though we've been in the house for 2 years, when we first filed to get the loan to do a solar panel project, the company that was trying to pull down the information on the house was having trouble actually getting the correct names on the mortgage. And honestly, that bit of a headache almost made me want to walk away. But we also ran into issues during installation. There was some really interesting stuff that happened during the inspections. And then even a year after our install, we ran into stuff kind of like this. So going forward, it's going to be one of those things where once you even have your system up and ready and it's running and everything's approved and good to go, you're going to possibly continue to get occasional headaches that are going to pop up out of the blue. So we got this letter last year, and we actually received this letter in the mail on Wednesday, November 11th. So I only had 3 days to hurry up and try and figure out how to get proof of insurance, including the language that they wanted in the insurance policy. And this was after we had been up and running for about a year and 2 months already. And we had dealt with something similar previous to this. And basically, whenever you get a solar panel system, depending on the size of your system, where you're at, state and city laws and ordinances, you're going to have a certain amount of liability, that insurance that you need to have. Luckily, I was already at that liability insurance, but maybe you need a state that the city or the power company or someone like that is now a vested interest in your insurance. And in this particular instance, what they wanted was they wanted a new certificate of liability insurance that contained the following language. And essentially they wanted it verbatim for this amount of language in here. And the insurance company that I currently have our home insurance through doesn't have this expressly stated like this. It has it stated as it being basically implied that the only way that something wouldn't be covered is if we were outside of that, which this is where it started to tie into whether you can make too much power than what you were previously consuming. So this was one of those things, and that's why that's foremost in my mind. But I'm really hoping that next year we won't have anything like this come up. So kind of one of those hope for the best, prepare for the worst type situations. So just make sure that all your paperwork is filed in like a orderly place. That way you can find any kind of information. You can easily access your dates. If there's a contact person that you need to call at the solar installers to help get you help with some of the stuff. So to sum it up, here's just the tips. So tip 1, slow down and look at panel placement. So try and curb your enthusiasm a little bit until you know enough that you can actually probably go in this direction, and if you truly want to go in this direction. Tip number 2, look at where power is consumed or lost, but wait before fixing it, or install your new high consumers before going solar. That way you have a record of a higher level of power consumption, which will help you in the future when your previous power consumption becomes a limiting factor on how much solar panel you can truly produce. We're just going to ignore that I said solar panel instead of solar power. Then tip number 3, do not sign up for community solar until you think residential solar is a no-go. So definitely don't sign up for it unless you're definitely sure that you're not going to go solar. Because some of those have strange contracts that may keep you locked in for longer than you're expecting, or you may have to pay a penalty for trying to get out of it. And it'll be a limiting factor on how much power you can produce. So tip number 4 kind of gets beaten to death by everybody about everything. And it's basically get multiple quotes and talk to different companies. The biggest reason that I talked to a whole bunch of different companies was because it seemed like each company had a little bit of a different spin on what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. And then tip number 5. So this one's one where you're going to run into little things that pop up. So you're going to run into issues in the first phase. You know, maybe you've got trees or something like that when they're looking at your house on Google Maps that it's going to be blocking things. Maybe the path they decide to run the wires through your yard winds up being the wrong path. Maybe during the inspection, the inspectors don't read the paperwork that your solar panel company sent about how a Tesla Powerwall 2 works. Maybe your city's attorney doesn't understand how your insurance works and causes a slight issue. And then maybe laws change going down the road that they want specific verbiage put into your insurance plan. So it's possible you're going to run into situations where you're like, why did I do this? But that's why you need to kind of stay positive, because inevitably you'll be making power that you'll be using to power your own house. You'll also be making power that you'll be putting back onto the grid, which will help power other people's houses. And if you get a battery backup, you'll be saving yourself possible headaches. Like this June 4th one was during a storm, which meant that my house's sump pumps stayed powered up even though we were in a power outage. And honestly, the Tesla Powerwall 2 is amazing, because when you lose power, all you'll see is maybe a flash of lights if the lights are on. But it didn't even affect the meeting that I was having at the time. in that it didn't drop the Wi-Fi connection. It didn't cause the VPN to drop out, which is super touchy, that the business I used to work for used, and was virtually seamless. Like, I had no issues with this at all. Even my wife noticed at one time that, hey, the lights flashed momentarily. And the cool thing about the Tesla app is that it'll tell you too, it'll send you a phone notification. So basically it'll tell you that, hey, you're in a power outage and you're running off the battery. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to hit the subscribe button if you liked it. And I'll check you guys next time. Back with the electric fan on the computer. Hey, man, let's get a bigger, better computer before you wind up getting solar. Windows Shift Q. Windows Shift. Tip number 3. Damn you, computer fan. Oh, it's not cars, it's the computer fan. This is a long video so far. Happy Easter, everybody.